This is the Texas Land Guys podcast, hosted by brothers Tim Dosch and Tom Dosch. With their partners David Marshall and Trip Rich, they have built DMRE, the leading land brokerage in Texas. With decades of experience brokering deals between landowners and real estate developers, they take you inside the deals that move the market.
Well, welcome to the Texas Land Guys podcast. We have a special guest today. Jesse Sanders is here with me in the Dallas studio. Tim joining us from Houston. How are you guys doing this morning?
Doing good.
Man, great to be here, Tom. Thank you.
Yeah, excited to have you. So Jesse is the executive director of Deer Creek Camp. Like I said, this is going to be fun because we have a lot of family history together. We've known each other since we were, Jesse and I, probably like 3 or 4 years old.
Yeah.
When we all lived down in Sugar Land, Texas. Mm-hmm. And Tim was a little bit older, so Tim was probably a little bit closer to some of Jesse's older siblings. But we share a lot in common. So Jesse, you want to tell the audience how many siblings you have, and then maybe how many grandkids now are in y'all's family. You guys have the Dosh's beat, but
well, we all love our wives, that's for sure. I'm one of 6. I'm the 5th of 6 kids. Kind of grew up in the Houston area doing the homeschool thing before it was as mainstream. So we were we had that in common. Kind of very intentional, raised by intentional parents. Some of the jokes I think at college probably both applied to all of us. My wife and I, we have 6 kids, 10 through 1.5. And then I'm of that next generation. My 6 are out of the 39 grandchildren. So a lot of big families. We don't think we're weird. Maybe you ask others around. But yeah, it's a big group. I had a great upbringing with my mom and dad, and wanted to raise a family that, we love the Lord, I love family, and it's been an adventure, but wouldn't have it any other way.
Well, it's neat. You brought your whole family to town, so you all stayed with us last night, and our wives got to meet each other, so they never met one another, and that was fun. I think they connected really quickly. And with 11 kids at my house, all under 10, it was a lot of fun. We had a great time, and we were talking last night about how both of us kind of avoided sharing for a long time that we were homeschooled because there was such a weird, stereotype to homeschoolers, and it was always a compliment when people found out to be like, oh, wow, you were homeschooled? Right. And that was good. You wanted the shock that you were homeschooled.
I am socially acceptable, apparently.
And so my family moved around a lot, but we got connected again when we moved back to Sugar Land and then played basketball together, junior high and a little bit in high school. And your family had started the homeschool basketball program in Houston, which became kind of a powerhouse back in those days when you and all your brothers were going through that. And then you went and played in college, and then you ended up and went pro and played overseas. And so I know basketball has been a big part of your story, and we'll get into how that connects with Deer Creek Camp and what you guys are doing there, which is unique and really exciting. But do you want to talk a little bit about maybe just what it's like to go overseas? I know your dream was to play in the NBA, and you ended up going overseas and starting there and getting married right before that. Kind of a pretty interesting, amazing story. Your first kid was born in Belgium, which is wild, but just you were through a lot really young related to that and just being thrown into that career and that life. And I think that's where you thought your career was going to be, and we'll get to where you've ended up.
Yeah. So again, man, I think benefit of being raised in a family where I had role models to look up to. My older brother Thomas was kind of a trailblazer on the athletic side. He was mentored by one of the other coaches at HCOA he had a son that played at Tulsa. And so Kevin, to our knowledge, was the first homeschool athlete to go and play at the Division I level. And so really kind of broke that ceiling. And Thomas wanted to be Kevin. And I came up wanting to be Thomas. And so it's just kind of nice having someone that was doing it ahead of you. And I got to have a front row seat to the process. Man, it's early mornings at the YMCA. It's running stadium stairs. It's working on your goals every season, every off season. What are you improving upon? And I think having a dad who coached, who both challenged and affirmed, was really just beneficial for me to have that foundation that I was never told I can't do this or, you're not going to do that. It was, man, go for it, but set your goal and you better bust your butt, and was blessed with good health. So God allowed me to go play at Liberty University, blessed with a healthy body. And again, was coached by 2 men that I think did the same. They saw leadership potential and invested in me as an individual. And I think helped propel that career beyond Liberty into the professional ranks. And like you said, Tom, I just knew I was going to be that third string NBA point guard, getting an opportunity to be the first guy in, last guy to leave. Never could cross that threshold. I had a sniff with the Mavericks and then some workouts with the Rockets, but I couldn't quite make that cut. But God allowed us to play a 6 years professionally, starting in Italy, then Australia, then Belgium, then 2 years in Germany, and last year in Portugal. And during that time, my wife and I are a growing family, speaking broken versions of various languages, trying new cultures. I don't know, really, it was really beneficial for us to experience new cultures, new perspectives. Something I'm so thankful for the experiences provided.
I guess you always assumed or hoped that you would end up playing basketball long term. So like when you stopped playing and you obviously grown up with your brothers, being close to your family, and that your parents instilled that in y'all to be close together, to do things together. Did you ever think you would end up running an organization with your brothers? Like, was that something you'd always wanted to do or thought you would end up doing?
Yeah, probably depending on what age you ask me. And we started, my first venture with my brothers was Sanders Brothers Landscaping. That was started at the age of 8 for me and at 12 for Thomas. And we were door-to-door salesmen, cutting grass. I think we had a knife sharpening business, power washing, and Christmas lighting. So it was a lot of versions, Sanders Brothers, Christmas lighting, Sanders Brothers. And I think some of that was just the freedom that homeschooling provided for. So you get your school done in the morning and then you could, for us, it was, okay, we want to work out. We want to make a little bit of money. Those are 2 areas of interest. Basketball really became front and center for me, probably in that early teenage years. That, man, I really love this. I want to do it. I want to excel. And competition was a part of, just part of our upbringing. Your brothers just, didn't matter if we were making smoothies, playing ping pong, or jumping on the trampoline. There was going to be some type of contest. There was a winner and a loser. So did a lot of that. For me, the desire to do a ministry, I think, was planted at a young age because of what I experienced my dad doing with the homeschool program. I saw him using basketball as a tool for discipleship. It impacted me and so many other young men. And as I evaluated my upbringing, for me, some of the most impactful relationships were ones that came from coaches or trainers. That was a medium that was very impactful in my life. Go on into the college and professional ranks. The fulfillment that I think I was seeking was not there. It was cool. You'd win an award or you'd sign a contract and it was short term, but there was always this desire. There's something more. There's something that God's designed me to do. I'm more than a stat sheet. Couldn't quite grab what that was right away. But I remember sharing with my wife, this is when we were at Liberty, our first date. And we had kind of some just intentional conversation that was prompted. And I remember sharing with her on that date that whenever I was done playing, that time I thought I was going to be an NBA ball player, but I'd love to have land, build a gym, and do a basketball ministry. And so there was kind of a half-baked dream, desire, goal to use basketball whenever I was done playing, to use basketball to impact young men. And so it's morphed and changed and grown throughout that time, but that desire was there at a young age.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you want to talk for a minute about your dad? Because you mentioned him a couple times, and last night you were telling me why he started the homeschool basketball program, and maybe even just share a little bit about what he does professionally, just representing families. But your dad's had a really strong impact on your life and your whole family's life. And he, it's neat to hear you talk about him now. He's in his early 70s, and you're like, when dad starts sharing just wisdom, it's like everybody shuts up, everyone listens, and it's just neat, the respect and love that you have for your dad. But it'd be awesome for our audience to hear about that, because we've talked a lot on the podcast about the importance of leadership and leadership in the home. And like that is something that a lot of times is neglected or not considered as important as like leadership in the office or leadership in career. Your dad, though, has built an incredible legacy, not just in the number of 39 grandkids, but the way that, and we've talked about, not everything's perfect, but his love for all of you and his continued pursuit of his faith in the Lord is awesome for us to see. And he was one of my coaches growing up, so I can attest to what that was like. Getting to play for a coach that you weren't just playing basketball, like he was truly building into your character and talking about Christians being persecuted or praying for people, whatever it was, going through a Bible passage together. Like that was so encouraging for me. I know he's had that impact on a lot of people, but do you want to talk a little bit more about him?
And I think both mom and dad modeled, no one's perfect, but they modeled really well in our family what it looked like to sacrifice for their children. And my mom, in laying down, personal desires, goals, aspirations to invest in our family. And at that time, they felt called to go into home education. And it was kind of taboo and there wasn't a lot of resources at the time. But I think the way they were first exposed to it is my dad is an attorney. That was his professional background. And he got called in to represent a family who had CPS had taken their children away over neglect of education. And so he was, what's happening? And it was a kind of a friend of a friend in ministry, and got to know their family. I was like, man, they're incredible. This is a great. And that was their first exposure to home education. Was my dad was brought in as the legal expert to kind of help combat CPS at the time on trying to get the children back with this family. And so they saw up close and personal what this other model was, and they were raising a young family at the time. I think I was about 10 years before I came on the scene at this point. And so by the time I came along, they were already homeschooling the older children, more from, not that it was like, hey, the other options educationally weren't sufficient. It was more, man, they wanted that much more face-to-face time with their children and have the ability to, train from a character development standpoint, just pour into family devotions, educational, athletically, we had a lot of time together that home education model allowed for. But fast forward a little bit, there's not a lot of, with school, you have extracurricular activities, sports teams and other opportunities that weren't available at the time. And my dad had wrestled with, for my oldest brother, how do you validate your manhood as, growing up in today's society? And he saw, you can do that in a work environment, you can do it in a sports environment. He wanted some vehicle for my brother to work hard at, to have goals, to train, to push into, to not just sit and to veg. And so there was some other mentors that kind of challenged my dad. Hey, you relate well with young men. He threw the football, played basketball. Athletics was a part of his upbringing. And so he stepped in to start this homeschool basketball program. And the desire really was to give homeschool athletes an opportunity to compete, to train, to work towards something. I don't think he had this aspiration to be the best basketball program in the Houston area. It was like, man, I want to give them an outlet to train, to compete, and then to disciple. And so I come along, they've ironed out a lot of the issues that they're addressing. Who do you play? Where do you train? How do you run a gym? It's all the stuff that we don't have a facility. Man, it was so cool coming in the stage that I came into, because there was already a program. There was already, there was a national tournament that you competed in. And we had older brothers that had kind of walked it out before us. The desire was compete, train, and disciple. I think we're big parts of what he was trying to do with that H2A program.
Jesse, I don't want to jump too far ahead in the story, but I think that's such an important point about, and I know that's part of your ministry today, and maybe I'd like you to kind of speak to that of really ministering to young men, because it seems like even more so today than back, in the 90s or early 2000s. I have a 14-year-old son, almost 15, and I see all these young guys, and they're on screens, they're on phones, they're on YouTube, playing video games. There's so much that is coming to kind of steal away their manhood, as far as like going and really, discipline, physical effort, some pain and suffering, character development, like all these things that you're talking about that your dad understood are so important. And the need that we all have to validate our manhood, to go do something hard and to grow as a person, to achieve something, to understand loss and how to come back from failure and work hard to win again. So maybe if you don't mind, I don't want to jump too far in the story, because the end of the story is this camp that you're working on now, but maybe just talk about young men today and the way you guys are ministering to them and the heart you have for them.
The core verse, Colossians 3:23, whatsoever you do wholeheartedly as unto the Lord and not as unto men. And that's a verse that has really been impactful to me. Another one, we see a man who excels in his work. He will stand before kings. He will not stand before unknown men. And so this desire to challenge, for me specifically in camp, it's not like it's just for young men. It's, for ages, boys, girls, as young as 5 all the way up to college ministry. But for me, I think the specific calling that God's put on my heart is to challenge young men. None of us were built to be idle. And I think often you see slippage and failure, it's when, men are apathetic. There's not a goal. They're not pressing. And often temptation and other devices will come in when there's a lack of focus and a lack of something that you're pursuing. And so, and not saying that everybody has to be an athlete, that you want to be a musician, you want to, pursue higher education. To me, it doesn't matter what the thing is, but there has to be a pursuit of excellence. It is not an excellence of, wow, look at me, aren't I great? No, it's an excellence. God's given you a gift. Steward that gift to the glory of Him. And so at camp, I'm so big on, man, understanding who you are. How has God wired you? What are you passionate about? What do you enjoy? And then pursue it. Get off your butt. Like, embrace the grind, get after it. And so that's, I think, for me, in camp, in working with young men, it's, man, how can we mine out, carve out, what do they feel called to? What do they want to do? And then, man, let's challenge one another. Let's sharpen, let's engage so that there's a pursuit of something rather than comfort and security. And if that's your pursuit, man, you're heading for a train wreck.
Well, and that's, I feel like our culture it's comfort. It's getting what I want right now, being impulsive. There's not a lot of character development, and there's not a lot of doing hard things. I talk to my son all the time about you need to do hard things. And none of us want to do hard things, but you have to do hard things if you want to pursue excellence. So,
right. Thinking about, Jesse, maybe fast forwarding a little bit to how the camp came about and just maybe telling the audience a little bit more about you and your brothers and like how that actually came about, and just, did it come out of the blue? Was it something you'd known about for a while? And just sharing that story. Because I think for a lot of our audience that maybe hasn't heard of Deer Creek Camp, could be a pretty incredible place for them to even consider sending their kids, even this summer. So we'd love to get into that a little bit more. But I think the story is really interesting of a family all kind of changing what they're doing and going out there to live together.
Yeah, absolutely, Tom. So for my wife and I, what we knew was basketball. And so you'd go over and you'd sign with this club in this country, typically for a 9-month contract. And then you'd come back to the States to train and visit with family. I actually had an injury my 6th year in Portugal that ended up being a career-ending injury. It was going to be about 3 months, but they went in and took more than they thought, and complications with rehab. And so it was, at the time, I was wrestling with, man, is this really the end? I've put 15 years of my life into really pursuing this. And I had some unfulfilled goals and expectations. I knew I was going to break into the NBA. And it was a hard pill to swallow to be, man, I wasn't good enough, or I didn't make it. It just, I couldn't provide an excuse. And so, okay, Lord, if this playing chapter is ended, what do you want me to do? And dabbled professionally in some business back in the States that I was partnering with my brothers on, but there was a desire to use basketball still. I knew it wasn't done. That season was done, but there was something more. And while I was playing, so rewind back, maybe about 2 years prior to the injury, there was a book that I read, passed it to my brother Thomas. My dad read it. It was very impactful. It was written by David Green. And the book was Giving It All Away and Getting It Back Again. And it was David Green's journey of what God was teaching him in generosity, the way he'd structured Hobby Lobby. So what he'd learned corporately, what he'd learned individually. And so during that time, we set up a small donor advised fund that we were, and the idea was, we want to do this ministry at some point. We don't know necessarily what it looks like, but could we commit to tithe to this and to pray over it weekly? And, one of the things we talked about was, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And so we kind of flipped that verse on its head, and we said, well, we're asking God to direct our hearts. What if we started parking a little treasure and praying over it, asking for wisdom? And there was about 3 years of just kind of some giving and praying, but not clear actionable steps. And so then basketball ends, and I'm action oriented. I want to go. Okay, now's the ministry time. Now let's start this thing. But it was very frustrating to me not knowing how to get off home base. There's a desire to use sports for discipleship. Basketball was the vein that I knew. But how do we start? We went and looked at land. We evaluated some ministries in and around the Houston area. Is that a model? Is this a model? And man, it was difficult. It was difficult because we didn't have a clear path forward. My brother-in-law and sister had met at a Christian camp and served there for years. And they had shared a while back that they thought God was going to call them back into camp ministry at some point. And during that time, we were kind of looking and praying and thinking, what could this be? Steve, my brother-in-law, was like, guys, I think there's enough parallel vision here with what we think God's calling us into camping, what y'all want to do with sports ministry. Could these two things coexist? And so that prompted now Jesse, Thomas, Steve, mom and dad to kind of start talking on it together. And then younger brother, John Caleb, was like, man, hey, if y'all do something together, I can build. Like, I don't know necessarily a ton about camp, but like, I want to be a part. And so now there's 4 families, my generation, mom and dad are kind of saying, wherever y'all go, like, we're in. And so that's when it got a little bit more pointed of, okay, could it be a camp ministry that there's sports as a component, because that's our background and passion. And so that's where, okay, now we had a little bit more pointed vision, and COVID was a catalyst that a lot of camps were really suffering because there was a big downturn. And so Deer Creek Camp came about, pretty wild series of events, but came about as the founding couple was getting to a point age-wise that they wanted to pass the baton to somebody else. So a lot of different backgrounds, what God was doing allowed for an opportunity in Medina, Texas. And we had been praying, looking, dreaming in Houston, Texas for about 3 years of what that would be. Pretty cool how God brought that to come about.
That's amazing. I remember when we heard, I think I heard through my parents that y'all were going out and taking over this camp. And just for our audience to think about, I mean, you're all doing something else, and then you all decide to go move out to Central Texas, kind of out in small town to take over a camp. You've never run a camp before. I mean, that was pretty amazing to think about, just taking on a whole business like that, and not an easy business. I just remember thinking like, wow, running a camp that'd be a hard business. And I'm sure even though your older sister and brother-in-law had experience, I'm sure still doing that together as a family, there's probably so many questions. And we've talked about what that would even look like with the inner dynamics of working together as a family and having to establish roles and responsibilities and who's going to do what. And so do you want to speak a little bit to that process? And
Absolutely. Well, Tom, you showed a lot more wisdom than I think I did at that time. I thought, hey, we've played pro ball, we've run some business. How hard can a camp be? I mean, we were so wrong. We all thought we were going to come in. Some of it was the financial needs of the camp, but we came into a situation where financially the camp could not sustain the families going out there. So it was like, okay, we feel unequivocally called to step here. Like every time we put a fleece out, God, are you sure? Are you sure? He would 4 or 5 different, really specific events. It was like, this is where we're supposed to go and what we're supposed to do. Financially, it didn't make any sense. We're leaving Houston, the area where there was businesses that had provided for families, and we're stepping into something that's very uncertain. And in Medina, Texas, like, this is a retirement community and it's a small camp. And what? Like, there was a lot of, I think, insecurity, but the calling was so direct. It was like, God's in this. And every time we ask, you get confirmation. And so I think stepping in, there was a lot of challenges at first, because you bring 4 families and there's one house. So, okay, Caroline's bringing an RV, someone living in an apartment, we're jumping in, we're trying to make this go. But then there's also the challenges time-wise. Well, how much do you volunteer at camp to try to start this engine up? Because camp really, almost bottomed out during COVID. So we're kind of rebuilding this model, yet we all have, an online marketing company you're working for, a business in Houston, or my little brother's trying to do real estate, and navigating some of those challenges of, hey, you need to provide for your family, but we're called to this ministry that we're so passionate about. And that was, there were so many growing pains with trying to navigate those challenges early on. The working together from a place of unity. And that was one thing we were joking about when we came to camp. We're like, well, there's 4 of us, and who weed eats and who answers the phone, and who, there's just establishing hierarchy of chain of command, authority, decision-making. Those were things that we needed a lot of help in and growth with. And the blessing was we had a background in working together for a number of years, but this was an entirely new thing that everybody but my brother-in-law, we had never done. Felt called, felt passionate, but also were pretty ill-equipped, I'd say.
Well, we were talking yesterday about the purpose that y'all had in this, because it's a ministry, but then it's also a business. And so it's both. But the purpose that each of you felt, and just like the missional aspect of, you all could have done something else financially to go pursue, higher levels of income. But then you all decided to go move out to Medina, Texas, because you really cared about building into these campers, building into these counselors, and like building something that would have this bigger impact. And so you also all have big families. So there's a lot of pressure there. Like when you have siblings that have 7 kids, 8 kids, you have 6 kids, there's a lot of pressure there to provide. And so I'd love to hear just going from recognizing that, hey, if we go do this camp thing, like we feel called, but like having to also just lay down we're we're not going to probably go and be able to just make a ton of money and financially be really secure. Like we're really going to be walking to this place where it's like, we really are like, we all should be trusting the Lord year to year, but we can kind of try to take control in our own way. You guys are really saying like, we're going to be trusting the Lord year by year to provide with things like COVID happening or the tragedies of last summer with flooding, like just knowing like God's going to have to provide the campers to come, and for this to work.
And I'd say one of the things that was, I think in the early stages of COVID, as we were kind of in the finishing stages of finalizing this opportunity of moving to camp, one of the things that was so, I think, eye-opening to me is, during COVID, a lot of the other distractions went away, right? There wasn't near as many group gatherings, social engagements, but we would meet as a family. And Sunday, my mom and dad would cook a big meal and would invite, whether you watch church online, we'd come together and we'd have some fellowship. And it was relationally very rewarding. We're all come together. But I had this idea of a huddle. And it's like, well, I've got some of my siblings and our children, we're forming this little hedge around them. And these kids are getting poured into and loved on. And it's great. And I don't mean to belittle that. But it was like, man, I've been given so much. I had two parents that modeled things so well for me, discipled well, poured into us spiritually, gave us a great foundation. It's I felt it was poor stewardship if I don't take that gift and then open it up to others. And so that's where I was like, man, our family is really well equipped to pour into others. And maybe some children we're going to reach don't have that same foundation that I was blessed with. And so are we going to stay inward facing and just pour into our own children? Or do we want to take what we've been entrusted with and open it up? And so that was this idea of kind of, instead of a huddle, open that thing up, and what other families, what other people could we encourage, challenge young ones with? And so in the discussions as a family, it was like, where are the giftings? Where are the passions? Okay, how can we use that for kingdom impact? That's what this is all about. And yes, do we want to run a successful business? Yes, we have to, because without the business being successful, the mission can't continue. So it needs to make sense financially, but that was never the motivation. The motivation was discipleship. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of sacrifices were made, a lot of, oh man, Lord, please, we need you to come through, because there's this doesn't make financial sense. We're taking a loan out. We're stepping out in faith. We need this place to grow. And the camp that we took over, it was a adventure camp during the summer, and then it kind of went dormant for the off season. And we looked at the numbers like, man, this does not work. We need churches here on the weekends. We need camp to grow, because we're coming in with big families and we're having to build homes, and we don't want to be working after hours on other ventures. We want to be here at running the ministry that God's called us to, but financially it's a long way from where it needs to be for this to be sustainable.
Well, and y'all had come into, and you can help with the timeline of this, but you come into camp, or around the time the camp was starting, with some level of financial security, right? That some of these decisions were kind of being made off of, right? Where you felt like, okay, not that you would be set up forever, but it was like, okay, well, God's provided some level of financial security there where we can kind of go step out and do this. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. We talked on some of this yesterday, but there was, again, previous careers that had led to varying levels of success. And so whether that be basketball or various businesses, at the time we were evaluating Deer Creek Camp, there wasn't this need for a paycheck to sustain. So there was some investments off to the side that were like, you know what, hey, this is God's calling and we're going into it. But it wasn't like, man, I need a paycheck day one to provide for my family. And that was, again, we saw blessing that, man, look, God's provided for us. Now he's called us, and there's some provision that's been set aside that we have some margin to press into. And I'm not sure I would have had the faith to step out had I not had this little nest egg over there. So there was, yes, it was a big step of faith, but it was also like, hey, we've got a little bit set aside. Even if it doesn't work, like there's a little bit of an exit plan. And then we found out a few years later that some of those things were not there. And it's, again, I don't know how much we want to get into that, but that was some of the stuff that was set aside for some of the various families. Their financial trajectory altered greatly in years to follow against any doing of their own.
Yeah, Jesse, I think it'd be great to talk about that story in a little bit more detail, because it's pretty amazing as you guys are making this huge decision to go start the camp and make this big commitment, and thinking you had a little bit of security. And then that ended up getting taken away. And I know that there's more than just a financial loss. There's a betrayal there too. But I think it's a pretty powerful story.
Yeah, man. So it's definitely been a journey. There was a financial advisor that was a friend that had presented an opportunity when I first started playing basketball. And it was, pretty explosive returns and lifetime of relationship and trust that had been built up. And so entered into that. And man, it was faith-based would be what, he presented it as, hey, we're doing this. And then it's a group of believers coming together and doing this. And then what came about, almost 2 years ago, a little less than that, it was all a scam. And so what, I had one of my good friends and guy that I had worked with and traveled with and raised children with, finding out that it was all a lie was the hardest blow relationally I'd ever walked through. And not only that, but it was, this was our nest egg over here. That this is where money that kind of above and beyond what we needed to live on, that's where it went. And so finding out not only was there a great financial loss personally, but now this guy had leveraged my reputation and others close to me had trusted him as well. So there was a financial loss, a relational loss, and then this weight of, man, I had endorsed him and now there's others that have lost. It was hard to put into words what those feelings were, the anxiety, the stress, the hurt, the confusion. How did I miss it? Just all of that. And it had gone for so long, almost 10 years, till it broke, and continue to learn and to see, man, God's faithfulness in spite of the loss, even in learning to forgive, man, like that, cause how could you do this? Like for money, this, it was worth all that, all the hurt, all the loss just for a short-term gain was really difficult to fathom. But then watching the way God, even with that, losing what I thought was the financial security, man, seeing God's faithfulness shine through and his favor, it's been cool to see how God's been working in spite of loss.
Yeah, what an incredible, it's hard to probably understand unless you've walked through what you've walked through. But like you said, the betrayal, like the need to forgive, and forgiveness is so hard, especially when the wound is still there and it's not like maybe that was resolved in the way you'd hope it was resolved. It's a bad situation. It makes me think of the verse where it says, what they meant for evil, God meant for good, because God can take that as horrible as that was, and feel like you're describing the pain of not just it affecting you, but affecting other people that you're close to, and the loss, and just such a hard situation. But then God can, your response to that and letting the Lord work on you in that, and bring this character growth and understanding of forgiveness and a greater depth spiritually. I know that there's an incredible blessing there, as hard as that has been to go through.
I think it's still a process. I think I believe I've forgiven him. Mm-hmm. But it's still, I think, a daily decision. Are you going to choose to dwell on hurt, or are you going to choose to go forward? And to me, as a Christ follower, I believe my mandate is to forgive. I've been forgiven of so much, and knowing the way, man, God sees me through the gift of Christ and what he did on the cross. Like, man, I have no other response than to forgive, even when I don't want to, even if it's hard, and even if it's like, dude, how the heck could you do this continually? You're in my home. You're, even when it doesn't make sense, like you read scripture, there's no other call than to forgive. Now, I'm not saying you have to necessarily rebuild relationship, and there's, trust and other things that may never come.
Yeah.
But the forgiveness is a mandate. And so that's been a journey we went through in the subsequent months to follow. That happened. We found out about that in early April of 24. And then in September of 24, I had a little bit of blood in my urine and thought it was a kidney stone. And we're just coming out of running camp, and it's full season, and I know I'm not sleeping well, and a lot of the stuff was very unresolved on the financial side. There's an investigation, but there's way more questions than answers. And then I go in to look at what I think is a kidney stone, and over a few consecutive appointments, it goes from no kidney stone to enlarged ureter to, hey, it's cancer, we need a biopsy. the cancer has spread. You have stage 4 urothelial carcinoma, and we need to start chemo today. And it was like, what? We're walking through the hardest thing we've ever been through. And now I'm 36 years old with our 6th baby just born. Financially, things are in complete just upheaval. And chemotherapy? Like, are you kidding me? I went for a 3-mile run this morning. I lifted weights yesterday. Like, I'm not sick. Like, y'all are wrong. Let's get another opinion. You're wrong. You're wrong. No way. No way. No way I have cancer. And just the weight of starting that journey on the heels of such hurt, and then starting to process that, man, like, okay, is this, did I harbor bitterness towards this man and I had those kind of fears and doubts come in? Am I harboring unforgiveness, and that's showing up in the form of this disease that's killing my body? Or is there something else going on? Am I being judged? Like, I had all these questions, and honestly, it was the only place I'd go for peace, honestly, was reading or listening to the book of Psalms. And it was like those parts where David's just like crying out, like, God, where are you? Like, that's what I felt. And for the first 35 years of my life, I knew favor, I knew success, I knew health, I knew wealth. And now in 4 months, I lost all my material wealth. And now I've lost all my health, and I'm stage 4 cancer. And it was like, I am broken to the point that the work ethic's not going to pull me out. I can't go do a bunch of push-ups and diet my way out of this. Like, God, I need you. I need you now more than I've ever been aware of how much I need you.
All right. Well, we're going to stop our conversation there today, and then we'll pick back up next week. Really excited for the second part, where we're going to finish the conversation with Jesse. So looking forward to sharing that with our audience next week.
Thank you for listening to our podcast today. If you have questions about land you own in Texas, send us an email at texaslandguys@dmre.com and follow us on LinkedIn to stay updated.